What's up guys, it's Endymion, and in this video I want to explore the concepts of the Scarlet Rot and its worrying implications on the future of the lands between, as well as what caused it and the various lore pieces which may give us a better understanding. Of course, this video will have spoilers, so if you haven't finished the game, well, here's your warning. And now, let's dive deep and talk about the Scarlet Rot of the Nameless Outer God. The Scarlet Rot is a fungus-like corruption that has existed within the lands between well before the events of the game's main narrative. The Rot was considered exalted at one time and was even worshipped by high-ranking monarchs. We know this due to the helmet called Mushroom Crown, which states, "Mushrooms found growing all over the body, these overgrown mushrooms form a towering headpiece." Long ago, great lords served the Scarlet Rot. Perhaps such fungal bodies served as their crowns. So it seems the existence of the Scarlet Rot has been a part of the lands between for eons as far as we know. What we also know about it is that the Rot's origins seem to be tied to some sort of unnamed outer god similar to the Greater Will. This god was prominent during its reign and was worshipped, as I explained before, until one day a blind swordsman challenged the god and sealed it away, saving the lands between. We know this due to the blue dancer charm, which states, "A cloth doll depicting a dancer garbed in blue, an ancient heirloom of some sort. The dancer in blue represents a fairy who in legend bestowed a flowing sword upon a blind swordsman. Blade in hand, the swordsman sealed away an ancient god, a god that was Rot itself. This blind swordsman who defeated the Rot god has their own armor set which you can obtain in-game. It's called the Blue Cloth set, and it states, "Cowl of a nomadic warrior, the blue color of its fabric symbolizes brisk waters, as fluid and flowing as the sword in the hand of its wearer. Just as still waters turn foul, stagnation leads to decay. Warriors must remain ever drifting." So it seems this legendary blind swordsman was responsible for saving the world from the corruption of the Scarlet Outer God. What's interesting is that this swordsman was blind, which is a peculiar detail since this swordsman's visual affliction is shared with that of the Empyrean known as Malenia, Blade of Miquella. Malenia was one of the twins born of Queen Marika and her consort, the red-haired King Radahn. It is revealed through the Gold Mask side quest that Marika and Radahn are actually the same person, just different aspects of one body given life. So that means Malenia and her brother Miquella were born of a single god, which is kind of weird and crazy. But what's also interesting is that Malenia and her brother are the only known beings within the game to have been born of two gods. But what's also troubling is that both siblings were cursed with afflictions that haunted their lives. Miquella was cursed to be forever in infancy like a newborn, whereas Malenia's curse was far more devastating and apparent. Malenia's body began to harbor the rot of the sealed Scarlet Outer God, and her flesh began to fall apart, which resulted in Malenia being given golden prosthetic limbs to replace those taken by the rot. And weirdly enough, just like the blind swordsman that defeated the Scarlet God eons ago, Malenia was also blinded by the Rot, but more about their relationship later on in the video. However, these physical afflictions didn't stop the masses from worshipping Malenia and seeing her as the true future ruler of the lands between. Malenia would become known as the Severed and was a legendary warrior who was never bested in combat. This was until Marika shattered the Elden Ring following the death of Godwyn, and during the ensuing war, the only two remaining beings capable of surpassing Marika were Malenia and her half-brother General Radahn. Radahn wildly outmatched Malenia, proving to be the only warrior capable of defeating her. But in a last-ditch attempt to defeat her half-brother, Malenia's body manifested the Scarlet Rot in full, infecting not only Radahn, but the entirety of the Caelid Wilds. As we know, following the abandonment of the Greater Will and the shattering of the Elden Ring, forces long forgotten began to return to the lands between, seeking dominance in the Greater Will's absence. The Scarlet Rot had clearly returned and was looking to reclaim the world as its own. One of these locations where the Scarlet Rot festers is in the Grand Cloister, which I decided to look around in. As I snuck around, I decided to sneak and peer at the statue the Rotborn were worshipping, and I saw what looks like a woman. With more closer inspection, it seems to be a woman holding something with both arms and her body being circled and grasped by something fungus-like in nature. However, when the smoke kind of clears just enough, it almost seems like she's being wrapped by a snake or something. You can sort of see the eye. Could this statue be of Malenia, or is the Scarlet God being represented here in the form of a snake or scorpion slug-like thing that's wrapped around the woman? Perhaps this Scarlet God is insect or arachnid-like in appearance, because when looking at a certain weapon called the Scorpion Stinger, it states, "Dagger fashioned from a great scorpion's tail, glistening with scarlet rot. A ceremonial tool used by heretics, crafted from the relic of a sealed outer god." Because when looking at the agents of the rot, they all have a very distinct, malformed, almost insect-like look to them. The pest enemies, as you can see here, are clearly malformed creatures with some resemblance to a human body with a multitude of human-like arms. So it seems that the Scarlet Rot's influence has either returned, or more unsettling, it never left in the first place. However, I want to go back to that relationship between the blind swordsman and Malenia. As it turns out, this swordsman was actually the one who trained Malenia into the legend she would end up becoming. We know this based on a few items, starting with the blind swordsman's weapon titled Flowing Curved Sword. It states, "Legends speak of a master of the sword garbed in blue and his curved blade that was patterned after flowing water. Strong attack unleashes a series of strikes akin to a dance, offering a glimpse into the legend." This is further confirmed via the prosthesis wearer heirloom, which states, "A talisman engraved with a scene from a heroic tale. Though born into accursed rot, when the young girl encountered her mentor and his flowing blade, she gained wings of unparalleled strength." It seems this blind swordsman who defeated the Scarlet Rot would end up training the very vessel for the same evil he defeated long ago. I guess irony has a funny way of showing itself, so after all the swordsman did, he ended up teaching the future heir to his worst enemy everything he knows. So that's great. This swordsman is never named, however, but it seems that without the tarnished interference, Malenia would have brought about an age of rot, as stated by the spell Scarlet Aeonia, which states, "Technique of Malenia, the goddess of rot. Creates a gigantic flower that blooms into an explosion of scarlet rot. Each time the scarlet flower blooms, Malenia's rot advances. It has bloomed twice already. With the third bloom, she will become a true goddess." This spell evokes the same physical form as Malenia's final resting place within the Haligtree, where the Tarnished faces and defeats her in combat. Her Scarlet Aeonia can still be found even after her apparent death, which means while the Scarlet Rot's source might have been stopped by the blind swordsman first, then the Tarnished next, it too could always return, like a festering wound that's kept unclean. Some were puzzled as to how Malenia survived the battle against Radahn and made it from Caelid all the way back to the Haligtree, but this is actually answered via a spirit summon ash named Clean Rot Knight Finlay, which states, "Finlay was one of the few survivors of the Battle of Aeonia, who, in an unimaginable act of heroism, carried the slumbering demigod Malenia all the way back to the Haligtree. She managed the feat alone, fending off all manner of foes along the way." Well, Finlay is officially a badass, but there's your answer as to how Malenia survived and was returned to the tree. What's sad about the battle that resulted in Malenia and Radahn becoming shadows of themselves is that once you defeat Radahn, if you go to the nearby dungeon called War Dead Catacombs, you can actually see the spirits of Radahn's and Malenia's armies still fighting each other in eternal combat within this very catacomb. So even after the end of the war and the destruction of Caelid and the corruption below, the fallen warriors still fight on, hopelessly, to honor their demigod rulers. What remains remains is that the Scarlet Rot is never fully contained in its entirety. The worshippers of the unnamed outer god still exist. Malenia is left seemingly slumbering in her goddess form within the Scarlet Aeonia as she waits for her twin brother Mikola to cure her, and amidst all of this, the lands between is being assaulted from forces from below the world to the very stars eclipsing it. And finally, I want to look at two more lore entries, the first being a talisman which encapsulates all of this called the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, which states, a talisman depicting the exaltation of pests, Rot for the Scarlet Goddess. O scarlet blossoms, flourish in distant lands and return to us the unwanted children. What's also interesting about this talisman is the shape of the pest, almost as if it's mimicking that of a great rune of the Elden Ring. And I just want to end on what is said on Malenia's great rune, which states, Malenia is daughter to Queen Marika and Radahn, and her great rune should have been the most sacred of all. Malenia is a powerful goddess of unimaginable importance, and the very notion that the Empyrean, trained by a legendary blind swordsman, may still one day bloom to life to return the world to the Scarlet Rot is a story we may return to one day when an expansion or sequel happens. But for now, I think that about covers the legend and tragedy of the Scarlet Rot. So what do you think of it? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Consider liking and subscribing, and maybe even sharing the video. Thanks to my patrons as always for their support, it means a lot, and I'm Endymion. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.